Everybody, video here for you today. Now this is a video that I've had a clip ready for quite a while. Just been meaning to talk about Newgrange. I have not talked about this site in Ireland for a long time. Here it is right down here. Might be 6,000 years old. Not exactly sure. This seems to be a very important Neolithic monument. If you look up the dating on this, I believe the standard line is about 3200 BC. You notice this is up kind of on a rise down here. Probably would have been seen from all around the area. But this has alignments built into it. Very important date. A lot of these cultures based their mythologies on the movements of the sun, and then related them to their stories on Earth. But the winter solstice sunrise would have been coming right up through the passageway through the entrance. And you notice how these kind of look like cow's horns here? Well, I'm going to play a clip at the end, about 4.5 minutes, where he talks about the symbolism here and the symbolism in Egypt. It's kind of the same thing. Now, when looking around this morning, I saw a couple news stories pop up on Newgrange. That's why I'm doing the video today. And I'm going to include that clip from a video I did about 4 or 5 years ago that not a lot of people have seen. But here it says Newgrange winter solstice to be live streamed as passage tomb remains closed. And here's a look inside the Newgrange passage tomb, the one day where the rising sun makes an appearance in the passage tomb here. Here's the vintage news. I saw this story just pop up today. Irish Neolithic tomb is the oldest monument in the world. And stuff like that will always be debated, but here is a look at Newgrange, and this was restored after it was excavated. It was kind of reconstructed starting about 60 years ago. Now, over 100 years ago, this is the way the entrance looked. Totally different here, totally overgrown. Then the one large stone down here with the Neolithic rock art on it. That is very interesting. We see that in other parts of the world. That's the way it looked over 100 years ago. That pic I just showed you was from the late 1800s. Here is one from the early 1900s. The entrance a little more cleared away. And here is a look at the entrance today. Those spiral symbols on that rock still sitting right out in front. But part of this has been reconstructed, probably based on what they originally found here. There's a good look. Here's that pic from the early 1900s. Below it, it says the base is surrounded by 97 granite and quartz stones, making a curve. The entrance stone is highly decorated with swirls, circles, chevrons, and other megalithic art symbols. And if we go inside the ceiling here, you notice they have those same swirling symbols right there, a few other things, but that tells me this is astronomical. Here's a look at the passageway at the site. Not much room there, but just reading a little, it says, O'Kelly relates a story of finding the mound in his work, Newgrange Archaeology, Art and Legend. The landowner in 1699, Charles Campbell, was looking for stones. In a large mound on his property, he found the type of stones he was looking for, and as they were carted away, the entrance to the tomb appeared. That right there is a look, the passage tomb right there. Here's a story from about 8 years ago, Irish archaeology, images of Newgrange through the years. This is about 245 feet across, or 75 meters. Here is some looks at some old pics when this place was totally overgrown. Here is a look before the restoration work started in the early 1960s. Cow on top of there. We're going to talk a little bit about cow symbolism coming up here. There's the entrance. Here, slightly overgrown. This last pic, very overgrown, trees and stuff growing on top of it. But there was some good restoration done to this site, and it definitely deserved it. Very important place, going back maybe almost 6,000 years. Here's a look at the internal passageway. Here's a look at the retaining wall and what they call the curb stones down here. The total weight of those, pretty incredible. Here's a look at some of that artwork on one of the curb stones. It says the stones, just for the curb, would have weighed 200,000 tons, leading researchers to believe they were brought up by boat up the River Boyne. The builders took special care to ensure the monument would remain dry by packing sand from the river and putty made from burnt soil into the joints of the roof stones. They also cut grooves into the roof slabs to channel away water from the structure, which has remained dry to this day. Here is a look from street view. This Neolithic monument, there are a few standing stones right out here. That'll give you a good look. I'm going to end this with about a 6.5-minute clip from a video I uploaded about 4 years ago, a 22-minute video. I'll leave the link for that below. John Grigsby is the guy doing the talking here. He talks about the Milky Way, the cow symbolism in this place and in ancient Egypt. Just thought it was an interesting talk. He also talks about Çatalhöyük, a very ancient place I mentioned in Turkey. He talks about the rescue of the sun, and I think that's very important because I think in ancient times there's a story of darkness reigning on this earth because of a cataclysm. I just think that's important, the rescue of the sun. But if we back out here, he also talks, and this is really important, the river Boyne here, same reason the river Nile was important, had to do with the afterlife, same reason why the Mississippi was important to the people in ancient America. This is directly related to the cow, and the stories on earth and the stories in the heavens. I've also talked about the meaning of Orion and how Orion was a ruler of the night skies because something in the past really bad came from the skies, and he was also a ruler on the earthly plane. I've tied that into the story of Gilgamesh also. That is a celestial tale built into that story, and it relates directly to Orion and ruling over the chaos in the night skies and something bad happening a long time ago. But in this lecture, he ties that in very well to his story of the cow, Orion rescuing the sun, and possibly in a very ancient time period. But here at Newgrange, the story of the sun dying on December 21st. That's why it's built into this place. But here's that lecture. Hope you enjoy it. I just thought this was interesting, tying these two cultures together. There you go.
For instance, it occurs in Egyptian myth. We have the earth god Geb and the sky goddess Nut. They're joined together in this kind of union before time, and then they are split apart by the air god Shu, and this creates the world, and from the void in between the sun rises. So this is a male-female pairing representing the earth and the sky and the separation. Nut is also the Milky Way, but also represents the Nile. So there's the water in the heavens and the water is reflected down below, as we heard about earlier. As above, so below. She's also represented as a white cow, known as Mehet Weret, which means the great flood. This is a great flood in heaven and the great flood on earth. And we can see here, this is actually an astronomical image from Temple of Dendera. This is the goddess Hathor, who is a variant of Nut, eating the sun on the horizon at sunset, and then giving birth to the sun on the eastern horizon the next morning. The sun travels through her body at night. And here we can see the same image with the sun as a solar boat travelling through the body of the white cow to be born the next day. So does this occur anywhere in Celtic myth? Here's Mehet Weret, and here's the goddess Nut as she appears on every coffin lid. She's associated with the dead. In Egyptian cosmology, your soul became a star in the afterlife. So you would enter the body of the goddess, which is the Milky Way, in order to be reborn. So this is why she's associated with death. Now, what is the relationship between this and Celtic myth? Well, this is Newgrange in Ireland. Newgrange, as I said, was associated with this figure here. That's actually the Cerne Abbas giant, the image I'm using there. He is mating with a goddess known as Boyne. Boyne means white cow. She forms the river Boyne. It's named after her. There's a great flood which happens after she walks around a well 3 times, and she's drowned in the water. So she is the great flood of the water, just as Mehet Weret is in Egyptian. But she's also associated with the Milky Way, as we will see. The Milky Way is called the Bohabafinya, which is the road of the white cow. Bruna Boyne is the Irish name for Newgrange, normally translated to palace on the Boyne, But as Boyne means white cow, there's a closer translation. Bru actually means belly or womb, the womb of the white cow. So just as in Egyptian tradition, the coffin represents the womb of the white cow goddess and the Milky Way, so we see that in Irish. And as we know, Newgrange is aligned on the winter solstice sunrise. So the ancient Irish were possibly being born from the womb of a white goddess as a white cow, as were the ancient Egyptians. Now, this connection between the cow goddess and tombs is something that we see throughout the Neolithic world. I won't spend too much on this, but it also goes back to the sort of the long barrows, where it can be argued that there is some sort of cow symbolism in these tombs. We have, for instance, head and hooves burials, where the bodies of the deceased were placed in structures which may have been covered in cow's hides. It's like going inside the body of the goddess. Same here, we still call these entrance parts of these tombs horns. That's our sort of archaeological term. But it goes back to ancient houses, which also were associated with Bucrania back in the sort of Vinca cultures in Serbia in sort of 6000 BC, and all the way back to Çatalhöyük. Now, the main myth we have from Indo-European times is the rescue of the sun goddess. Here she's rescued by a couple of twins. This is from Bronze Age Denmark. This is from the Galihus drinking horn, where we see the rescue of the cattle, which also represent the sun, by this figure. And I argue that this figure with the 3 stars above him is possibly related to Orion. Orion is the sun rescuer in a lot of these myths. And this sort of image persists into later mythology. In Greek mythology, Orion carries Kedalion, who is the son of Hephaestus, on his shoulders. And he wanders across the sea trying to get his eyes back. It's the same image as the sun appearing over the shoulder of Orion. We see it in St. Christopher bearing Christ over the waters. It's really to do with the placement of Orion next to the Milky Way and the coincidence of the rising of the sun with the rising of Orion at previous points in time. Depends what time that is. If you think it's the winter solstice, Orion carries the sun on his shoulder at the winter solstice in about 10,500 BC. I'm not going to go too much into those dates. Otherwise, about 6,000 BC, this happens around the time of the equinox, spring equinox. But anyway, Orion is seen as leading the sun out of the underworld, as rescuing the sun.